Well, I hear this banging on the door, and at that time of night I was curious. Obviously, I opened up the door, and he was more than banging on it. He was trying to beat the door down. Just basically tore everything apart. Dressers, mirrors, windows, broke the windows to try to start my bed on fire.
That chaotic scene inside his home was just one stop on a rampage through East York last night. It started off with a crashing of a stolen taxi, then a forced entry into an East York home, then an attempt to light that home on fire. Now the SIU is looking into the bizarre incident. Greg Ross is live for us tonight. Greg, take us through how this all unfolded last night.
Well, Dwight, police tell me it actually started several blocks away from here when a man stole a taxi. That was near Roblin Avenue and Plains Road. Moments later, that man was involved in an accident near Pape Avenue and O'Connor Drive, but the man didn't stop there. At this point, it's not clear how he ended up at this home, which is near Pape and Torrens Avenue, but it was the beginning of what was a terrifying experience for the man that owns this home here behind me.
It wasn't just a knock. He was trying to beat down this door.
John Bartley says he was watching TV just after 10 o'clock last night when he heard the banging on his front door.
I was assuming that maybe somebody was hurt and was looking for help.
But he says when he opened the door, he instead found a man acting erratically.
He just barred it in, and I just told him to leave. He's telling me to get lost. So I thought, well, one of us is going to go.
The man forced his way into the kitchen, where he found a large fork used for barbecuing and threatened John with it.
He literally grabbed that barbecue fork from right there off the wall.
Mm-hmm.
And where were you when that happened?
Standing right where you were.
So that was the end of that.
Well, yeah. I was a little too close to the guy with a weapon, so, I figured the best, get out of the Dodge, phone the police, let them deal with it.
As John made a beeline for the front door, the man barricaded himself in his bedroom. Eventually, police would have to break down the door to get him out.
I'm going to guess it didn't look like this before he went in there?
No, I'm a little bit cleaner housekeeper than that,
When he returned to his home today, John found his bedroom destroyed.
Just basically tore everything apart. Dressers, mirrors, windows, broke the windows to try to start my bed on fire.
In addition to that, John says police investigators rearranged some of his furniture, leaving him with quite a mess to clean up. But first, he's hoping to catch up on some missed sleep.
To make matters worse, you not only does somebody come and take over your home and then the police have to investigate, but you have to sleep in your car.
Well, the thing is, my keys, my wallet, everything was in the house. I wasn't allowed to come in.
Police tell us that they did try to negotiate with the man before forcing their way into the bedroom. They say at some point he suffered injuries. He had to be taken to hospital, and that's why the SIU has taken over this investigation, Dwight.
Just a bizarre night out there. Thank you for that, Greg. And a man is dead after a shooting last night in Brampton.
I heard this shot, and I thought Toronto won a few days ago, and people are still celebrating. But I definitely heard 4 straight shots.
Police say they were called to the Queen and Kennedy Road area around 11 last night. They found a 20-year-old male suffering from gunshot wounds. The man was rushed to hospital but later died. Investigators are appealing for any witnesses to contact them. And Toronto police have released images of a wanted man in connection with a stabbing that happened during the Raptors championship parade on Monday. Now, the suspect is described as being in his mid-20s with a medium build. He was wearing a black sweater with a red and yellow design and black pants. He got into an altercation with a group of men at Yonge and Dundas, and police say he stabbed 3 men and a boy with a knife. They're all still in serious condition. Thousands of people were nearby watching the Raptors rally. Police would like to hear from anyone with video footage of the area at the time of the stabbing. The trial for the man accused in the Yonge Street van attack will take place early next year. Alec Manassian was in a Toronto court today where he learned his trial will be by judge alone next February. That's something his defense team had asked for. There was concern Manassian wouldn't be able to get a fair trial in Toronto. Manassian's lawyer, Boris Bytensky, had put forward a motion to have the trial moved to another location, but he says that's no longer necessary with a judge-alone trial. Manassian is facing 10 counts of first-degree murder and 16 counts of attempted murder in the April 2018 attack. Layoffs hit Ontario's healthcare sector after changes by the Ford government. This after the Premier's promise during the campaign that no one would lose their job. In just a few minutes, we talk one-on-one with Health Minister Christine Elliott.
Well, it's not easy, I know, for the people that are losing their jobs. There's 416 people, and I'm sorry for that, and I hope that they find employment very quickly.
Stats Canada confirming today what anyone who shops for food already knows. Grocery prices have skyrocketed in the last year, especially when it comes to vegetables. Matt Nagrabi-Selassie has more on what's behind the increase.
Thank you. When it comes to buying groceries, shoppers have noticed a difference.
The prices are going up, compared to a few years ago.
I have noticed definitely a huge price increase in some vegetables. Like I remember 2 weeks ago I was buying celery, and usually celery is like $2.99, it was $5.99.
This St. Lawrence market vendor says it's not just celery. Across the board, he says the price of produce is way up.
Brussels sprouts, another item, over $100 a case, where normally $35, $40, even $45 max. This week, for example, green beans. Green beans are usually about $40 a case. Today, they're $95 a case. Certain prices are ridiculous now.
Today, Stats Canada said that the cost of fresh vegetables has gone up by 16.7% compared to last year. And at least one expert we spoke to says the weather has a lot to do with that. Mike Von Masso is a food economist with the University of Guelph.
What we normally see at this in the winter months is higher fruit and vegetable prices as we're importing that decrease over time towards April, May, June. And what's happened this year is that decrease hasn't happened. We've had bad weather in several places that's delayed crop and tightened supply. And so we haven't seen the prices come down like we usually do.
And this vendor says he is feeling the pinch because of that.
For myself, profit margin, there's no profit. The prices are so high, you can only get so much on stuff. People only pay so much for stuff. So I'm not making my profits way down.
Still, these shoppers won't cross vegetables off their grocery list.
Stuff to get creative with it, I guess.
Magda Gebrselassie, CBC News, Toronto.
He dive bombs people that come mostly down the stairs. It has no mercy. It really dives down, and you can hear it hit people's head, the back of their head. So it really goes down with force.
Watch your head if you're walking around Liberty Village. Red-winged blackbirds are once again on the defensive. How residents are dealing with the aerial attacks. Coming up. We have some breaking news out of the legislature tonight. Let's bring in our Queen's Park reporter, Mike Crawley. Mike, you've just confirmed what we've been hearing about for days now, that the government is planning a shuffle.
Yes, in fact, White just got the official word from the Premier's press secretary. Tomorrow morning, Doug Ford is going to shuffle his cabinet. So there's a ceremony scheduled at the Lieutenant Governor's suite at 10:30 tomorrow morning. That's the place where the cabinet gets sworn in. We've been hearing about the shuffle for a couple of weeks now after Doug Ford has had a bunch of poor polling results in the wake of all of the cuts that have come after the budget. We're hearing that it's likely to be a fairly big shuffle with at least 6, maybe 10 ministers changing positions, and a couple of ministries likely broken up, including the Children, Community and Social Services Ministry, and possibly the Health Ministry.
All right, we've been hearing about some of the troubles for this government, from the booing at public events. You talked about the polling numbers, talked about their effect on the federal election coming up. How significant is this move then tomorrow?
Yeah, and I don't think, Dwight, that it's happening because of the booing or just the polling numbers or any of those sorts of things, but very clearly the Ford government wants to change the channel a little bit. It's hard to say how much having a few different people in these ministries is actually going to make much of a difference to how Ontarians feel about this government. You're likely to see a few GTA backbenchers get promoted into cabinet, and there's an attempt possibly by the Ford government to try to put a more positive message on their time in power, because my sources in the PCs are saying that Premier Ford feels that there's just been too much negativity in what's been going on with their government in the last few months.
Thank you for turning this around so quickly for us, Mike. We know you're just getting the information now, and you'll, of course, have much more for us tomorrow. Thank you, Mike.
I want to assure our public sector workers, to our nurses, to our teachers, and to our doctors that no one, and I repeat, no one, will lose their job.
That was a promise Doug Ford made repeatedly on the campaign trail last year, but today his government announced more than 400 layoffs as the health ministry merges 20 agencies into one big one. Our Mike Weiss spoke with the health minister about the shakeup. Mike.
Dwight, the minister talked of eliminating duplication, doing away with planning and administrative positions in all of these agencies and centralizing them into one new Ontario Health Agency. The problem is patients won't be seeing any benefits in the short term since government still has to set up that new centralized agency.
It's not easy, I know, for the people that are losing their jobs. There's 416 people, and I'm sorry for that, and I hope that they find employment very quickly. But we're doing this for the bigger picture of being able to put more money into frontline care services. So any savings that will come as a result of this change will be put right back into frontline care. That's what people have told us that they want and need. So, for example, the savings from today could replace 700 hospital beds or 6,500 long-term care beds. That's what people have told us that they need.
When you talk about jobs being duplicated and replaced,
yes,
how does that lead to a savings?
Well, we have the 14 local health integration networks and 6 agencies that are now being brought into Ontario Health. They will have one board and they'll have one back office support. So instead of having 20 back office supports with all of the people enrolled and working in those areas, we'll now have one. Those savings from those jobs can then be put into frontline care.
Now we're going back, it seems, to the old centralized model again. How are we supposed to get from A to B? The changes today to measurable things that people see on the front lines improving?
Well, we actually have one board that is going to be responsible for the operations of local Ontario health teams across the province. But instead of having LHINs, there will be groups of providers that are coming together to be able to provide care in their local geographic area. We found that the LHINs were not providing that kind of care on the ground. There were a lot of people that were very frustrated with the LHINs, including some of the healthcare service providers. We want to streamline that and allow the providers themselves to get together to talk about where the gaps are in care and to fill in the gaps. Right now we see that often when people are discharged from hospital, if they still need home care, they don't know by the time they leave the hospital who the provider will be, how often they'll be arriving, and what services they'll be providing. We want to make sure that before people leave the hospital, they have all of that information and they're ready when the home care provider gets there, and the provider knows who they're dealing with too.
But if they don't have that information today, you haven't hired these teams who are going to figure out the system in the future. How does that improve things today when you haven't taken that next step to figure out how the new system will work?
Well, we have already issued the application information to the local providers. They've submitted, as I said, 150 readiness assessments. We are going to then proceed with a group of them to have them proceed with the entire application. We'll select the team and then they'll be ready to go in the fall.
How will you know in 2 to 3 years that you're getting the outcomes that you wanted to see?
Well, I think there are 2 really important indicators. One is just the measurement of the number of people who are readmitted to hospital, having been discharged and perhaps not received the kind of home care that they expect to receive. The number of people who are receiving home care in a timely manner. I think there's a lot of indicators that we can put into place and measure. We want to make sure that people feel connected to the system and they feel satisfied with the level of care they're getting. So we will have surveys and so on that we will submit to patients and families to make sure we are doing it right.
Okay, Minister, thank you for your time.
Thank you. My pleasure. Thank you.
Well, the government says it eventually expects to save about $350 million a year from the changes. That comes from not filling vacant positions and from today's layoffs, although Minister Elliott says she admits some of those who lost their jobs today may end up being rehired once the Ontario Health Agency gets around to being set up. Dwight?
Thank you, Mike. And the treatment center says it will lay off more than 100 employees as a direct result of autism funding changes that were made by the province. Erino Kids Treatment Center for Children with Disabilities says it is eliminating 291 full-time positions. That's including frontline staff and management. The center says 178 jobs will be brought back, but only on a 9-month contract. Instead of funding service providers, the progressive conservative government is moving to give money directly to families to pay for autism therapy. But the changes have been slammed by the opposition, many who work in the field, and also by parents.
Families have no idea when their child can expect to receive funding. And since the age cap still exists, families know that they won't be receiving enough to actually afford the services their child needs.
My name is Jonathan. I have 3 sons, all of which are on the autism spectrum. Providing a flat sum of money, not enough for one of my sons and too much for the other is not fair. And it's also the same therapists aren't going to be there. Like, they're firing close to 300, and they're not hiring back nearly that many. And the service is going to change.
Erino Kids Center serves Halton, Peel, and Dufferin County and is one of the largest providers of clinically based autism services in the province.
For years, Canada Blood Services is trying to get more diverse donors to sign up to their stem cell registry without much luck. Coming up, how one man is trying to change that.
The main thing is awareness, and that's people think it's really painful to donate, but that's not the case.
The official start of summer is around the corner, and it sounds like today we could actually start talking about a humidex, because it felt humid out there today.
Yeah, that's right. We finally have a little bit of humidity, and I've dusted off the humidex maps, maybe used it once or twice this spring. That's about it. But we'll have a look at that. And, it's not that significant yet, but as we get past the weekend, towards the beginning of next week, then we're really going to notice some humidity coming at us a little bit, and we will be into summer. A wet Thursday on tap, so we do have some rain showers on the way for tomorrow, but summer officially Friday, 11:54 a.m. I don't know if you're going to be water skiing necessarily, but it's indicative of summer. And the weekend outlook looks good. You can be in that lawn chair. We're going to have some sunshine, dry conditions, and fairly mild as well. The current temperatures are certainly mild out there, but let's get to Dwight's Humidex. Okay, you can add 3 degrees, essentially 3, in some cases almost 4 degrees, in terms of getting the feel of what it's like out there because of the humidity. A few spotty showers, mostly to the north and to the northwest of the GTA. The odd isolated shower could make its way in through the overnight. I think we'll stay mainly dry, just deal with some extra cloud cover coming back in. And then the system really arrives as we get into the day tomorrow. As it does, we'll start to see showers developing light at first. And then into the afternoon, we could see some heavier amounts, especially for southern parts of the Golden Horseshoe. You could locally get some significant rainfall there. I'm going to show you the accumulations a little bit later in the show, anticipated. Overnight tonight, though, 16 degrees the overnight low, 20, a little cooler tomorrow. Those northeasterly winds are going to be a bit breezy and a little wet, but I can't wait to show you that weekend outlook, Dwight.
Thank you, Colette.
You're welcome.
Visitors keep flooding the Toronto Islands, but when they get here, they're discovering another type of flooding. I'm City Hall reporter Lauren Pelly, and I'll tell you how the city's looking at a longer-term fix coming up.
A stem cell transplant can treat more than 80 diseases and disorders, but some ethnic groups are less likely to find a donor. That's because Canada Blood Services doesn't have a lot of diversity on their stem cell registry. Taylor Simmons spoke to one Toronto man who is trying to change that.
You're my hero, man.
Thank you. Tom Wong regularly organizes blood drives like this one at his downtown office because he knows the difference donors can make.
It was all the donations from these folks out here who helped with all the blood products that I needed while I fought.
But a couple years ago, Wong needed a different kind of donation to win his battle. The CBC first spoke to him in 2015, a year after being diagnosed with a rare form of cancer. He needed a stem cell transplant to survive.
We're almost looking for your genetic twin.
Canada Blood Services says if family members aren't a match, people from the same ethnicity are the next best bet. They share many of the same genes needed for success, but out of the stem cell registry's 450,000 donors, about 70% are Caucasian, about 7% are Asian, less than 1% are Black or Aboriginal.
What we're finding is that we need to get out and raise more awareness in diverse communities. People are being diagnosed with life-threatening diseases every day, and we need to make sure that their donor is on the registry for them.
Wong has taken on that challenge since his diagnosis. He speaks at schools and community events to try and create a more diverse registry.
Some of it is just exposure. Some of them is a cultural adverse idea, which is pretty much unfounded. Yeah, the main thing is awareness, and that's people think it's really painful to donate, but that's not the case.
In the end, Wong couldn't find his own match in Canada, but through an international database, he did find a miracle.
It was like a hallelujah moment where I found out that my donor was actually a woman from Germany, and that was amazing.
How crazy is that, based on everything that you've heard up until this point?
So crazy, but it doesn't, to me, it doesn't negate the need for that diverse mix still, because the stats do say that your best chance is within your own ethnicity.
So healthy now, Wong continues to fight.
I'm not going to stop. It's just dear to me, and this is whatever weakness this created, it kind of made me stronger.
Taylor Simmons, CBC News, Toronto.
After the break, disheartening, record-breaking numbers from the United Nations on the amount of people displaced by war and violence. We'll take you to Lebanon and talk to Syrian refugees next.
The weather update is brought to you by Train Extreme Conditions Testing. It's hard to stop a train, really hard. Train, the most reliable heating and cooling brand.
It is a troubling way to mark tomorrow's World Refugee Day. Today, the United Nations High Commission for Refugees released a new report. It says the total number of people displaced by war, persecution, or other violence has reached record proportions. More than 70 million people on this planet are considered refugees, the highest number the UN has ever seen. Margaret Evans has more now from Lebanon, which is now home to many Syrian refugees.
Syrians continue to make up the largest population of displaced people in the world. And of course, many of them have fled across the border into neighboring countries like Lebanon, which is host to about 1 million Syrian refugees. This camp that I'm in now, or an informal settlement as it's known in Lebanon, is one of the oldest in the country. Many people have been here about 5 years, maybe even longer. Many of them have come from homes, and of course we know the devastation that that city on the Syrian side of the border faced. It's a long time for a small country to host such a huge number of refugees. And if ever there was a sign that the Lebanese are growing tired of the burden, it is this place. There's been an order from the army. Any Syrian refugee living in a dwelling like this can't have anything, any permanent walls beyond 1 meter high. And they were ordered, these people, given a deadline saying you have to tear down your own houses to at least 1 meter high.
The regime in Syria destroyed our houses, and here we are destroying it using our hands.
Many of the Syrians we've been speaking to say they simply don't feel safe enough to return to Syria, and they don't know if they ever will. The end result, that people who've already been made homeless by war find themselves homeless yet again. Margaret Evans, CBC News, Arcel.
A short but important trip is on the way for the Prime Minister. Justin Trudeau left Ottawa this afternoon, bound for Washington and the White House. He'll be meeting with U.S. President Donald Trump tomorrow to talk about trade, China, and other global issues ahead of next week's G20 summit in Japan. We'll have more on his trip for you from Ottawa a little later in the show. Federal Conservative leader Andrew Scheer has finally released his plan to fight climate change. It was part of his fifth and final pre-election policy speech, a clear alternative, he said, to the Liberal carbon tax plan.
Number 1, green technology, not taxes. Number 2, a cleaner and greener natural environment. And number 3, taking the climate change fight global. This plan is the most comprehensive environmental platform ever put forward by a political party in Canada.
Scheer's climate change plan is 60 pages long and includes 55 policy commitments. He said it goes after large carbon emitters and is the best chance to reach the Paris climate change targets. But the plan does not include any hard data on how much this proposed policy suite would actually reduce the country's emissions.
I'm Talia Ricci, and coming up tomorrow, dozens of people from Grassy Narrows First Nation will meet here at Queen's Park demanding a health care facility. We meet a few of their residents who've been living with mercury poisoning.
I have anger because, you know, our people have lived with this for so long and nothing was ever done. Like, why were we not important enough to, you know, be taken care of?
Parents and students are nervously waiting to hear what's on the chopping block for Toronto schools. The TDSB will be tabling their budget at tonight's meeting. Natalie Danowski joins us live from outside of that meeting. And Natalie, what's on the table tonight?
Well, Dwight, there are some protesters behind me, some parents, some students, and some teachers. And of course, they don't want to see any cuts, but there will unfortunately be some because the school board is dealing with a $67 million shortfall. Now, initially what was proposed was to cut some bus services for French immersion students, but last week the board figured out how to make that work and keep those buses going. I am told, though, that some music programs are either going to be cut entirely or reduced in size. But really the big thing that the TDSB is doing is it's cutting some of its staff positions here at the main building. So those staff members will then go back to teaching jobs within schools. And if they're senior staff, which is likely the case, they're going to be bumping out some of those younger staff members. So we do know that there are going to be some job losses. Exactly how many? That's going to probably come to light in the coming weeks. Dwight?
All right, Nellie, we also now know where displaced students from that York Memorial fire will go next year.
Right, so there's two options really on the table. The first one is George Harvey, and that's where the York Memorial students were for the remainder of this school year. And the other option is Scarlett Heights. It's a school that's probably about 5 kilometers or more away from the majority of the students, but it is a vacant building. And I am told that most parents and students really prefer the Scarlett Heights option because they want their own resources. Even though George Harvey was able to accommodate the students, I'm told that a lot of the resources were overwhelmed. The cafeteria was overwhelmed. Some of the science labs also weren't big enough. And there were a few instances where 2 classes from the different schools had to share 1 classroom. So right now, parents are really pushing for the Scarlett Heights option. Another problem, along with distance, though, for the Scarlett Heights option is that the building has been vacant for a few years. So there's no desks or any other type of learning material in there. So the board would have to figure out how to get all that in. But they are going to be voting on that tonight. So we should expect a decision later this evening. Dwight?
Thank you, Natalie. If you're passing through Liberty Village in the next little while, you want to keep your eyes to the skies. Residents have become targets for some fiercely protective birds. Angelina King joins us now live from Liberty. And Angelina, birds usually like to avoid people, but not these ones.
Oh, exactly. It's actually the people desperately trying to avoid the birds in this situation. I want to show you this. Take a look down here. Somebody has written a warning on the sidewalk in chalk. It says, "Watch out for the bird, run." We've been here for a little while now. So far, fortunately, I have been okay, but when we were here earlier this afternoon, our cameraman Mike got attacked by one of the birds when he was photographing it from pretty far away. So right now, a lot of people are making their way home. I'm seeing some people duck, certainly a lot of people keeping their eyes up and watching out for that protective little bird. They're calling him Dive Bomb Dave. While the red-winged blackbird has become a bit of a celebrity in Liberty Village,
everyone has met him once now.
He's not a popular one, unrelentingly attacking people, their pets, their kids, anyone who gets too close to his nest.
When you're walking down that street, take cover because you never know. He flies at you fast and he can really do some damage.
If you see a blackbird coming right at your face, it is scary.
Well, we sat out there for about an hour last night and we saw at least 20 or 30.
And what are people's reactions?
Some people scream and go running. I saw one woman actually run into the street and almost get hit by a car, so it's kind of dangerous. There he is now.
And word is there are at least 2 more like him.
Birds are like my #1 phobia, so this was kind of a nightmare come true.
Megan Evans says she's traumatized and spoke with us under one condition, that we stay far away from the birds.
He came out of nowhere. Like, honestly, I didn't really see it. I just felt it. I felt a beak. I felt like the little claws. And yeah, it was pretty freaky. And by the time I looked up, he was gone.
Did it hurt?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
That was yesterday. Today?
I took an Uber to work. It cost me $2.50 to take like a 2-minute ride down the street. Yeah, I'm a little nervous. And I still have this as my shield for when I'm out and about.
Last year, signs were put up near Queens Quay and Spadina warning residents of the birds. Experts say this species is more aggressive right now because it's nesting season, and says the birds are just trying to raise a family.
These guys are just trying to protect their nest, and they're trying to protect their space. They are really, really aggressive, partly because they have many nests in the same area, and so they have to protect it not only from predators, it will look at us like a predator, but also from other males that are trying to invade that territory.
So experts say if you come in contact with these birds, if you see them, it's best to steer clear, stay calm, and keep in mind that we are in their habitat. Now, the people here in Liberty Village say that these birds have kind of brought them together in a funny way. There's a Facebook page, people are posting a lot of videos, even a poll on what to name these birds, and people are sharing different routes on how to avoid this area where the birds often are. They'll be doing that until at least the end of August, because that's when nesting season ends. Dwight?
I like the lady in your story with the $2 Uber ride. That's hilarious. Thank you for that, Angelina. Over on the Toronto Islands, it's not attacking birds they have to worry about, it's the water. Roads and shorelines are still swamped tonight. Lauren Pelly now with city officials looking at long-term solutions to what's now become a recurring problem.
Hello. Visitors flocking to the islands for a summer day trip keep getting a soggy surprise.
Oh, I just stepped in a puddle.
Well, it's pretty wet so far.
Oh, I just pictured nice forestry and the restaurants and pretty much what I see here, minus all the puddles and the lake overflowing and the sandbags.
Big chunks of the area's road network and shorelines are still flooded several weeks after record-breaking lake levels, even though pumps are working around the clock and hundreds of sandbags are holding back the water.
We need something more permanent, more sturdy.
Allison Rogers has been living here all her life and says the temporary measures in front of her home aren't working.
When the water erodes the sand underneath, the water just runs underneath the wall or the wall collapses. People have tried to reinforce it, but it's, as far as permanent solutions, I think they need to come up with something that won't wash away.
A new report from the Toronto Region Conservation Authority recommends going beyond the measures implemented after flooding in 2017 by raising roads and building more permanent barriers. Strategies restaurant staff on the north side credit for already keeping their patio safe.
Well, the wall here kind of protects us from the water coming up, where on the other side they don't have that, protection from the harbor, I think. Because you can tell the flooding is mostly on the north side. Right. Here, it's all dry at the boardwalk.
A drop of water anywhere on the bank.
No.
From a cost-benefit analysis, this would be one of the best investments we ever make.
The area's councillor says it would all cost less than $20 million to implement.
I was actually surprised that the costs weren't higher. When you consider that the Toronto Islands are the second most popular tourist destination in the entire city.
The report heading to the Conservation Authority board this Friday is just a first step, and more city recommendations on flood strategies are coming in the months ahead.
There's supposed to be solutions to the 2017 flood. I guess what I'd like to do is catch up so that we're not a flood behind, but who knew it would happen again 2 years later.
But it did and could again, leaving residents like Rogers hoping the next fix doesn't get washed away. Lauren Pelly, CBC News, Toronto.
Hopefully, Colette, Mother Nature can help a little bit, at least for right now.
We sure wish that could be the case, and it will be if we could get past tomorrow. So, unfortunately, in the short term, we are looking at some rainfall on the way, coming to our area through the GTA, but into southwestern Ontario as well, and a little bit erratic in terms of the amounts. Hard to pinpoint where we could see some heavier amounts, and hopefully through the islands, it's not going to be such a problem. But look at these areas stretching along the shores of Lake Erie. Rainfall amounts from 20 to 50 millimeters through here, and that's why Environment Canada has issued a special weather statement, and I would say especially even over towards Hamilton. I'll show you on the accumulations here. You have the risk of seeing some heavier amounts as this moves through, and primarily through the day tomorrow, and then it moves right back out again. But this particular model wants to give nearly 50 millimeters towards the Hamilton area, 35 St. Catharines, and it doesn't look like much back towards Windsor, but I was seeing projections much heavier just to the south there, where they could be as much as 40 millimeters. So again, a little bit erratic in terms of the amounts. Temperatures not not erratic. They're close to seasonal, 25 degrees and a little humidity. So the Humidex, add a few more degrees and you kind of get what it really feels like there on the skin. And this is what we're looking at the moment. So for now, it's really staying to the north of us here in the GTA. A few isolated sprinkles could make their way in, but primarily through the overnight hours, we'll just see the clouds building in and then the rain coming through into tomorrow morning, beginning to develop in the earlier morning hours, like around 8 a.m. or so. Getting heavier pockets there as we get into the early afternoon, it looks like. Otherwise, we're talking about many areas just seeing scattered showers in terms of the heavier stuff. Again, staying a little bit further south as the system tracks just a little bit further south of us. And then we go into Friday, the first day of summer, and it's moved out. High pressure moves in, sunshine comes at us too, so it is looking good. We just have to get through tomorrow. Overnight tonight, our lows mild, 16 to 17 degrees for the overnight lows. A little cooler tomorrow. You're going to notice the winds coming out of the north-northeast and a little gusty at times, so it's not going to feel like today, but Friday looks great, 22. Saturday, sunshine, 25, and Sunday, even a little warmer. A few more clouds, not much, 26, and even some heat and humidity for the beginning of next week, Dwight.
Thanks, Colette.
You're welcome.
Leaders and members of a Northern Ontario First Nation are in Toronto this week, demanding action on an ongoing mercury crisis. Grassy Narrows has dealt with the effects of mercury contamination for half a century now. They are calling on the government to help build and operate a facility to take care of those affected. Talia Ritchie explains.
We had actual results like come to us. This is how much mercury was in our blood. And
when Chrissy Isaacs saw the piece of paper, she says something clicked. Her symptoms finally made sense.
Like my husband, he has to help me a lot, like lifting things or opening things.
In the 1960s and 70s, 9,000 kilograms of mercury was dumped into the river upstream from Grassy Narrows. 90% of the population experiences symptoms of mercury poisoning, which include numbness in fingers and toes, seizures, and cognitive delays. Isaac says she's traveled the nearly 2,000 kilometers from Grassy Narrows to join this fight for a mercury care home for future generations.
This would be the main access road in.
The proposed $19 million project would be tucked away from the main area of the community and incorporate aspects of nature and Indigenous culture, while offering medical care for those suffering from mercury poisoning.
When you have this sickness, you're always cold, you're always, and again, the warmth of the sunlight is really meant to have that warming feeling.
In a statement to CBC News, Indigenous Services Canada says building a health facility in Grassy Narrows is our priority, adding we are ready to start flowing funds and can do so through a contribution agreement that will allow work to begin almost immediately.
And comprehensive justice.
The chief of Grassy Narrows says the offers made from the government so far aren't meeting their demands. He's also calling on the Prime Minister to visit the community.
If the Prime Minister can switch his schedule to go to a big parade, there's no reason why he can't switch his schedule to come to Grassy Narrows.
For Isaacs, she's living with the knowledge that her symptoms will progress as she gets older.
Why were we not important enough to, be taken care of?
Tomorrow, the group will march from here at Queen's Park to the Department of Indigenous Services Canada on Bay Street. They'll be carrying blue fabric to mimic a flowing river through the streets of Toronto. Talia Ritchie, CBC News, Toronto.
We all mourn our victims and remain steadfast in our resolve to holding to those responsible to account.
Murder charges are laid against 4 men in the downing of a Malaysia Airlines flight over Ukraine 5 years ago. Nearly 300 people were killed, including 1 Canadian. Details next. Almost 5 years after a guided missile shot down a Malaysian Airlines jetliner over eastern Ukraine, killing all 298 on board, charges have been laid against 3 Russians and a Ukrainian. All were at the time leaders of a pro-Russian rebellion in the region. Their trial is scheduled to begin next March in the Netherlands, but it's unlikely any of them will actually be there. Chris Brown has more now from Moscow.
Investigators today said the 4 men charged with murder involving the crash of MH17 were part of a chain of command that reached all the way from the crash site right into the heart of Russia's government.
We now have the information, have the proof that the Russian Federation is involved in this tragedy, in this crime, in one way or the other.
At the center was Igor Girkin. He's a former Russian security officer who at the time was the commander of separatist forces in the breakaway Ukrainian region of Donbass. He's heard on a wiretap almost begging with another Russian commander to please send him more anti-aircraft weapons as well as crews to use them. In another wiretap, the commander calls him back and tells him that that help is coming. That's important because in previous reports released by the investigators, we could see photos and all kinds of social media posts of that Buk missile launcher leaving its base in Russia, coming along the border and stopping just before Donbass. Adding to that today, there were texts that were introduced from a Russian soldier who was there at the time. He was talking to his girlfriend. This is very interesting. And he told his girlfriend that some of those soldiers were going on a secret mission. And she was trying to guess where. And she said, Ukraine. And he wrote him back and said, you're not only beautiful, but smart as well. Nonetheless, this afternoon, Russia continued to deny everything. A spokesman for President Vladimir Putin said today since Russia was not invited to take part in the investigation, it would have nothing to say. Interestingly, though, Igor Girkin did release a statement on social media. His comment was simply that separatists did not shoot down the plane. You can read a lot into that. He could mean several things, including that he didn't do it, but also perhaps that it was Russian commanders and the Russian crew that did. Notably, the investigators were silent on that today. They did not say who they believe pulled the trigger. Instead, they're asking any active Russian soldiers to get in contact with them, promising them anonymity if they help with this investigation. Chris Brown, CBC News, Moscow.
And as we head to break, here's a look at where the markets closed today. Stay with us. We'll be right back. The Prime Minister is on a short but important trip to Washington. Justin Trudeau and a large delegation left Ottawa this afternoon, heading to a meeting at the White House tomorrow with U.S. President Donald Trump. Evan Dyer has more now on this one-day visit.
Well, the Trudeau government believes it's in a pretty good moment with the Trump administration, a relationship that's been pretty rocky at times, but they believe this is a good time to bring a big delegation down to Washington and discuss a number of issues, NAFTA being one of them, of course. So we're going to see tomorrow a big bilateral meeting involving not only the leaders themselves, but also Canada's Foreign Minister, Defense Minister, and Finance Minister, and most of their U.S. counterparts. The acting U.S. Defense Secretary won't be there. He's embroiled in a bit of a scandal at the moment, but others will, and so will the national security advisors for both leaders. They're going to talk, of course, about NAFTA ratification, but also China, with Canada looking to get a statement from the president himself rather than more junior officials in his administration, calling on China to let the two Canadians who Canada feels are effectively being held hostage in China, to let them go. But in addition to that, Canada wants to talk about the wider relationship, the fundamentals, defense, security, and intelligence sharing. Those will all be under discussion tomorrow. After that, it's the Hill that will be the focus of this visit, and the lobbying effort in Congress, which of course is where ratification has to happen. And let's recall that it has to happen in both houses of Congress. The problem, though, is more in the Democratic-controlled Congress. And the first of those two meetings on the Hill that the Prime Minister will have tomorrow will be with Nancy Pelosi, where he'll make a pitch for the ratification of NAFTA. The Prime Minister spoke about that today. Let's listen.
There'll be a big conversation about the path to ratification of the new NAFTA, and we're going to make sure that we're keeping in step with them. We have an ability to recall Parliament if we need to. We will also make sure that we're monitoring the pace at which the Americans are ratifying the process.
There is some urgency here in the sense that the House of Representatives is approaching the end of its session. Only 14 sitting days left as of tomorrow by my count. So they really do have to make this happen fast. That's a very short period to negotiate a trade deal. But in a sense, you could say that at this point, the urgency has been felt more in the White House than in Ottawa. It's really Donald Trump who wants to show his base that he's been able to ratify this new deal. Canada, which once feared that the former deal would be torn up, is now feeling a lot more relaxed about that prospect. Evan Dyer, CBC News, Ottawa.
The rain did not follow the PM to Washington. It was 31 degrees there today. Will we be hitting that mark anytime soon? Well, let's back after the break with one final look at your forecasts. Stay with us. We're back in just a few minutes. After more than 6 months in space, Canadian astronaut David St Jacques is getting ready to return to his home planet. In his final media briefing today, St Jacques spoke about how he's preparing for his return to Earth on Monday.
The day I go back to Earth, I will have to pinch myself. I think it will all feel like a dream. I will be maybe wondering if it all really happened. So I'm trying to burn it into my memory as much as I can. Merci beaucoup tout le monde. Thank you, everybody. See you soon.
No, thank you, David. I like the way he flies out of frame like
he's
that.
going to have to learn how to, he was saying,
He
to
talked
walk
about that,
again
yes,
on Earth. Like,
yes.
you know, with gravity. It's pretty cool.
Can't wait to talk to him when he comes back home. All right.
Canadians can be very, very proud of him. I don't know how proud you are of this weather that we've got coming in. It's spring.
It's
rainy,
the rain.
you know, cool and rainy. But just one more day of it. One more day of spring, and I can't say one more day of rain, but I mean, we're going to have a nice string once we get past tomorrow. So we do have showers through the day tomorrow. Overnight tonight, some of that cloud cover, 16 degrees. Primarily overnight, the showers are to the north and northwest of us. But tomorrow we will see, at times, maybe towards the later afternoon there, or mid-afternoon, some heavier rains coming through, and then it tapers off and moves out tomorrow evening. The high a little cooler tomorrow, though, Dwight, 20 degrees.
Let's take it tomorrow so we don't have it for the parties on Pride Weekend. That's it for us tonight. We'll see you back here tomorrow.